Okay, here goes 3.1.5 quiz. This quiz has to do with anti-immigrant beliefs. In the 1920s, there were so many people who were coming to our country wanting to take part of our industrialization and our factories that were booming, and there were just so many factories, so many jobs to be had that everybody wanted a little piece of it. So unfortunately, what happens is when you just fight, imagine if you just fight a war in Europe, World War I, you have experience with people from other countries, you want to just get back to, dealing with just Americans again. So you come home and suddenly all these people start coming into your country and you just want to get back to normal, but all these other people from other countries, especially problem countries that were involved in the war, coming over, and you might be thinking, if you're like many others in the 1920s, they'd be thinking, I don't want them here. How are we going to protect the people who are here? How are we going to make sure that they still have their jobs? We don't want all these people coming into our country and taking our jobs. Does that sound familiar? It's a common thing that's still thought of today. It's never going to, that line of thinking is never going to go away. It will never not be an issue. Okay. So one issue that came up because of immigrants coming over and wanting jobs is something that's called the Bisbee deportation. So basically what happened is these were workers, most of them were Mexican American workers, and they were working in mines, and they were striking against the horrible working conditions that they had. Their companies didn't care to give them better working conditions. They would just hire other people who would work for cheaper in their place, so they didn't care about strikers. And there was a group who basically they got themselves together, and they considered themselves like vigilantes, and they wanted to get rid of all the people who were taking American jobs, and they were bent over on immigrants. What's the problem here? So what happened was these guys came and they got thousands of these striking workers and marched them to a different state. They marched them from New Mexico to Arizona. So they marched them all the way away, thousands of miles. They forced them by gunpoint to walk away. So this is the Bisbee deportation, and basically Mexican Americans were targeted because of their immigration status, not because of, anything that they did. Is only because they were an immigrant. So another thing that happened that is true to show how horrible things were for people who were immigrants coming into here was the Scopes trial. This is one thing that we did talk about. I just want to remind you guys so you guys can remember. This is when there was a murder case, and there was two suspects. They were both Italian immigrants. There was hardly any evidence at all, not even close to anything that would convict as guilty, but because oh nope, this is confusing. So the one I'm talking about where there's Italian immigrants is not the one that you see on the picture, so ignore that because that's a different one. I'll show you in a second. So this one, yeah, they're immigrants, they're anarchists, so they don't like government that much, so they're convicted of murder, and there's no evidence, and they were held as guilty and executed because of this murder that they think they committed, but it was fueled by the hatred of immigrants. Okay, that was the reason. If they were not immigrants, they would not have been convicted guilty for the murders. Immigrants from Japan were not allowed into the U.S. in the Immigration Act of 1924. So, I mean, they didn't even allow Japanese immigrants to come in. Let's see. Palmer raids, basically another vigilante type instance where people targeted immigrants and usually were very violent towards them in, taking them out of their homes and trying to chase them away from their businesses. So again, just more acts where they were targeting people. It got really bad in the fact that we had something that's called the Sedition Act. So basically, sedition is it's not legal to say anything bad against the government. So when you have an immigrant coming over to the country and they're talking bad about the government, then it's all hands on deck. We need to get rid of these people. And there's this group called the the American Legion, who are basically those vigilantes that I was mentioning earlier. They wanted to be like the defenders of the American people. So the only reason why people actually supported the Sedition Act and the American Legion, who were doing these things, were because everybody was scared about foreign influences elsewhere. They did not want foreign influence. They didn't want people from other countries coming in and telling us what we should do with our country. We still wanted to stay isolationist. So anything foreign is bad, okay? Definitely a high point. Anything foreign is bad, according to them in the 1920s. So I'm going to show you that cartoon that I was showing you. This, the Scopes trial. The other one was not Scopes trial. So in this Scopes trial, this is basically as part of one of the culture wars in the 1920s. This was the trial that said evolution should not be taught in school. So you can see Scopes trial is often called the Scopes monkey trial. You have monkeys right here. Basically, it says evolution is not allowed to be taught. Okay, this was, has been there. There's a teacher who taught evolution, and basically they said that he broke the law by teaching evolution, and the law upheld it. So not very good. So the last unit was talking about returning to normalcy, right? So in returning to normalcy, they wanted to get back to American ways of thinking and not foreign ways of thinking. They didn't want foreign influence. Remember, again, they wanted to stay isolationist. So the bad part is in them trying to return to normal and not allow foreign influences to come there, there's something that arises that we call xenophobia, and that is a fear of immigrants. Okay, it's even like a hatred of immigrants. Okay, and that basically takes us into the last quiz. So I will highlight that in the next video.